My boss promoted his sister instead of me after 10 years. That's when everything changed. But before I share my story, please take a minute of your precious time to support our channel. Your support and love keeps us going. Congratulations, Aaliyah, I managed, forcing the words through a smile that felt like it might splinter. My name is Nyla Carter. I'm 39, a Black American product manager who's spent a decade keeping Northbridge systems standing on 2 feet. I've been divorced for years. My weekends belong to my daughter, Zora. The rest of my life, for better or worse, has been poured into this place. The 15th floor conference room was filled to the corners, warm bodies, cold coffee, and that rehearsed hush people wear when they know the script and don't dare improvise. Laptops snapped shut the instant the door opened and Charles Benton, our 48-year-old CEO, strolled in like a man with his own soundtrack. He's a broad-shouldered, dark-skinned brother in a navy suit that strained the buttons, waves slicked neat, cufflinks flashing under the LEDs. He thumped the table with his palm, as if to test its loyalty. Northbridge is entering a new era, Charles boomed, voice dipped in ceremony. And I'm proud to introduce the leader who'll carry us there. My heart rose, and then stalled. Aaliyah Benton. Air vanished. Then came the applause, loyal, hollow, safe. Aaliyah, 27, breezed to the head of the room in a powder blue blazer and immaculate nude pumps, head held high like a step and repeat had suddenly appeared. She's Charles's youngest sister, another Black American face that matched the family portraits lining his office. 6 months in the building and somehow standing on the summit. Her white handbag, crisp as a lab coat, landed on the table. A key fob winked from the strap, not the brand but the signal. She didn't need to prove a thing. She was proof. Aaliyah brings fresh energy and a bold vision, Charles said, pride leaking into every syllable. The Benton family has always stood with Northbridge. The Benton family. Of course, that was the headline. Across the room, Brian Coles, my lead dev, the same Black brother who once kept vigil with me for a 30-plus hour server rescue, flicked me a glance. His clapping slowed, his eyes dropped. Pity. Helplessness. I kept smiling, stone still, and picture ready. Under the table, a cheap pen gave up in my grip, with a sharp crack. No one heard it but me. Aaliyah took the mic and shimmered on cue. Northbridge's future is intelligence, innovation, and a holistic user journey. We must think big, move fast, and embrace change. It was the kind of speech that sounds profound when you don't have to ship anything by Friday. A new hire grinned like they understood. Someone else doom-scrolled until Charles's gaze skimmed past their screen. The whole scene felt like community theater in designer clothing. Everyone knew their lines, and the bravest thing anyone did was pretend to believe them. 10 years of quiet miracles erased in a clap. No one here saw Zora perched on the corner of my office couch, doing math homework while I stitched a broken payment flow back together at 2 a.m. No one counted the school concerts I missed, or the nights I swallowed tears when the system coughed blood and the dashboard bled red. Those sacrifices made a neat backdrop for the family photo now being staged. The applause rolled again. I clapped too, palms meeting like wood. Charles's eyes cut to me, smug and satisfied, the look that says I knew you'd keep your place. I returned a thin smile. Inside, something cold set like concrete. Have you ever been nudged off your own ladder, so the boss's family could skip the rungs? Tell me where you're reading from. I see the notes from Newark to Atlanta, from Cleveland to Jacksonville. But right then, a single thought burned clean and bright. If these were their rules, I needed to write my own. The awkward clapping hadn't finished echoing before my mind sprinted backward, unraveling a decade. I had just walked out of family court in East Orange, my trunk holding a stubborn kettle that clicked when it boiled, a backpack of tech books, and Zora, 8 years old, buckled in the back seat with her lips pressed thin. We landed in a walk-up in Newark, our bedroom window overlooking a parking lot that never slept. Northbridge Systems called. We're growing fast, Charles told me in the interview. There's room to rise, for the right people. At 29, the math I believed in was simple. Steady work equals steady light. The first month, the phone buzzed at 3 in the morning. Major outage. I cracked the laptop on my kitchen table and dove into code like a winter river. Painful, breath-stealing, necessary. By sunrise, we were stitched together. Zora patted out with her pillow. "Mama, why are you working at night?" she mumbled. "So the lights don't go dark," I whispered, pulling her close. From then on, I measured time in bugs. Sprints like rosary beads. The night before a big launch, a dependency updated itself and torched our checkout flow. Slack went full bonfire. Crying emojis, frantic threads. I didn't cry. I typed until my back burned, and at 5-something we exhaled as one. I slid to the carpet. Zora draped a blanket over my shoulders. "You look like a superhero," she said. "Who forgot to sleep?" When the world bent in 2020, our living room became a small command center. Zora's headphones pressed grooves in her hair on one side of the room. On the other, Grafana glowed like a heart monitor. PagerDuty howled. I learned to swallow lunch in 7 minutes, hug my kid in 3, and give the rest to servers. On the wall above my desk, Zora stuck neon notes. "Outage back in 20, like tiny flags of faith." One day she muttered, "Dad's new wife gets weekends. You get bug fixes." It wasn't cruel. It was just accurate. There were shining days, too. In 2017, a client demo started coughing up bad checksums. The room went still, then colder. I rerouted requests on the fly, fixed the validation path mid-sentence, and kept going like nothing had happened. The email that afternoon called me calm in the storm. Charles read it out loud. "Your leadership material, Nyla. Be patient." Patient stuck to me like a label I couldn't peel off. Patient when I stayed until 11 while the rising stars ordered rideshares. Patient when my KPIs beat targets, but the budget for my team shrank to prioritize brand positioning. Patient when a deck I wrote got presented by a shinier face trending on LinkedIn. At Northbridge, be patient felt like an ER where the doctor smiles, says soon, and disappears. Colleagues called me invaluable. At first it warmed me. Later I learned corporate dialect. Invaluable means indispensable, but not necessarily promoted. The pillar you lean on, not the name on the plaque. So I gave myself a private promotion, a thick black notebook with a textured spine. I wrote every shortcut, hairy fix, and hard decision in green ink. I called it Playbook N. It wasn't pretty slides or pastel rockets. It was the difference between a demo and a disaster, between a headline and a mea culpa. Every time I dragged Northbridge back from an edge, Charles offered a hand clasp, a smile, and that same lullaby. "It's coming. Be patient." Sometimes there was a $20 coffee card with Rockstar scrawled on it. Zora grew up amid those rituals. Purple streaks in her curls. Side-eye for any AI strategy clearly cribbed from a big tech webinar. "If the app dies whenever you sleep," she said once, "maybe the problem isn't sleep." Sharper than any performance review. Once I spent a month building a board deck. The day arrived, a newly minted analyst, nice kid, good posture, walked on stage holding my slides. I took a seat along the wall with a legal pad. When my idea flashed by, someone wrote his name under it. That night, I opened Playbook N and wrote, "Experience equals invisible ink." I'm not perfect. I merged the wrong branch once. Sent an email too blunt. Skipped dinner more times than I like to admit. But if the scoreboard is outcomes, I dragged products out of pits most folks don't even know how to find on a map. Each save earned the same compliment dressed as a promise. Your leadership material. It started to sound less like a bell and more like a leash. In one year-end one-on-one, Charles said, "We're aligning for scale. Next cycle looks promising." I shelved that hope in a mental box labeled open later. The next cycle, Aaliyah arrived, new badge, glass office beside his, and a brand new electric sedan parked where visitors could see it. Did I notice the signs? Of course. I told myself she was a senior intern with good taste in shoes. I stayed patient. I closed a gnarly platform project, scrubbed months of tech debt, and sailed through a clean security audit. I bundled the work in a crisp report. The reply came back. "Nice work." Then a calendar invite titled Vision, my name not included. That night Zora leaned against me at the kitchen table. Mama, what do you want if it's not this? I stared at the notebook. At my hands, knuckles a little rough from a life spent on keys. Respect, I said, then laughed. And a Saturday. This morning, when Charles puffed his chest and Aaliyah soaked the room in buzzwords, I felt the ice crack. Not because I was shocked, but because I had still been foolish enough to hope. A product manager who worships data, clinging to blind faith. I had been patient so long I became a patient of my own belief. Time to close the notebook, at least on their chapter. That night, caffeine kept my eyes open and my heart pounding a warning. I headed for the coffee machine by the so-called executive suite. Light leaked through the cracked door. Voices rolled out with it. I wasn't snooping until I heard Vernon Tate, a senior board member with salt and pepper waves and a baritone that carried. Nyla's got a decade in. Clients trust her. She keeps the floor from falling out. That's the kind of foundation an IPO doesn't collapse on. My pulse jumped. Charles answered, smooth as lacquer. Aaliyah is young, polished, and fits the image. Investors love a bright face. Nyla? She'll fall in line. She's got bills and a daughter. She needs us. The words hit like a dull knife. Not she's ready. Not she's the future. Just she'll fall in line. Glasses clinked. Laughter stretched. I pressed against the wall until the shadow of the exit sign cut across my shoes like a warning stripe. Everything rearranged itself in my head. I wasn't a candidate. I was an airbag. Useful when they crash, invisible when they pose for photos. I poured coffee with hands that shook so hard the lid rattled on the tile. Back at my desk, the code blurred. Only 3 words flashed red. Fall in line. They didn't misjudge me. They priced me. Loyal meant trapped and predictable. Chains disguised as compliments. I opened Playbook and wrote, steady this time. When they praise your loyalty, double check whether they mean your leash. Then I watched the clock move forward, minute by minute, and made a promise to myself that didn't need applause. Friday morning, Northbridge buzzed like a plastic beehive, lukewarm coffee, keyboard chatter, polite laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. I walked in with my laptop bag on one shoulder and a slim white envelope in my hand. Light as paper, heavier than anything I'd carried through those revolving doors. Charles Benton lounged in his glass office, leaning back while Aaliyah tilted an iPad toward him, a chart glowing between them. I knocked. He looked up, irritation first, then the courteous smile he saves for company postcards. Nyla, come on in. I set the envelope on his desk. The faint rasp of paper onward made a clean line between us. He frowned. What's this? My notice, I said evenly. 2 weeks. He tore it open. Shock flared, then heat. You've got to be kidding. No. He stood so fast the chair squealed on the floor. Be reasonable. You're walking out after 10 years because you don't like one decision? That's childish. There it was, the oldest trick in the management handbook. Label resistance as immaturity. I let my smile sharpen. Childish, I repeated, calm as glass. After a decade of delivering under fire, after saving this place from outages, you still don't understand. I'm not a shadow, Charles, and I won't pretend to be one. His fingers drummed for control. I can make this very difficult. No glowing reference. This industry is small. Inside, a bitter laugh rose and cooled. Threats, Chapter 1. Clients already know who carried the weight, I said. They'll remember with or without your adjectives. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. He pivoted. Think of your daughter. A chill pressed behind my ribs, but my voice stayed steady. Exactly. It's time she watches me stand up, not fall in line. The office air felt heavier. The leather, the faint clink of last night's glassware, the hum of an AC unit working too hard. He sank back into his chair, eyes narrowing at the piece on his chessboard that refused to move. Let's be adults, he said, suddenly smooth. Associate director. Higher comp Aaliyah handles vision. You run operations. Win-win. A made-up title to hide the leash? I replied.
No.
Nyla, I'll finish my 2 weeks. I'll hand everything over because our clients don't deserve the fallout from your family show. But after that, we're done. The words landed like a flat palm on water. No splash, just a widening circle. Charles opened his mouth, then shut it. Control didn't have much to hold anymore. Those 2 weeks felt like living in 2 timelines at once. By day, I wrote clean handover notes. By night, I combed through Playbook N, flagging details I knew Aaliyah would never think to ask about. Emergency call chains. Vendor escalation ladders. The tiny deploy hack that stole back 1 hour from every release. The checklist that turns an outage from panic to procedure. I left the facts. I kept my judgment. Aaliyah's heels clicked by my desk more than once. She leaned in with an earnest smile. Nyla, can you walk me through the API choreography again? I just want the big picture. I opened the diagram and traced the path, idempotency keys, rate limits, back-off rules. No commentary. No adornment. Her pastel highlighter skated across the printout. Got it, she chirped. I remembered the nights those rules were written in cold coffee and adrenaline, when the difference between big picture and big problem was my pulse. Glory was never split evenly. Colleagues slid me quiet DMs. You'll be missed. This place won't be the same. In public, they kept their heads down. I didn't judge. They had kids, rents, elders to care for, same as me. Charles avoided me unless cameras were around. Once, he wandered into a session while I stepped Aaliyah through our resilience matrix. He waited, then announced, grand as a ribbon cutting, see Nyla? You're irreplaceable when you help. That's your gift. I turned. Funny. I thought irreplaceable meant not getting replaced. Silence pulled the room tight. Papers shuffled. Charles coughed and changed the topic. The night before my last day, the building settled into a hush only the guard lights could keep. I packed the small things that had carried me. A chipped ceramic mug, a photo of Zora with melted ice cream on her chin, and Playbook N. I opened the notebook and wrote one final line for Northbridge. They called my loyalty a strength. In their hands, it was a leash. I closed the cover and slid it into my bag. Morning came. HR forms, badge surrender, the choreography of departure. Aaliyah gushed thanks she hadn't earned. Charles delivered a curt nod, then a parting shot. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But it will be my mistake. The glass doors sighed shut behind me. Outside, the noon sun was honest and bright. For the first time in a long time, the air tasted like mine. The I-95 stretched ahead like an endless gray ribbon under the summer sun. My old pickup rattled over every seam in the pavement, its bed carrying a handful of cardboard boxes. One box held the black-spined Playbook N, 10 years of sweat, pages bent with coffee stains, patience scribbled in green ink. Every bump made the notebook creak as if whispering, "Don't leave me where they turn me into someone else's script." The phone on the dash buzzed. I tapped speaker. David Lang, voice brisk but warm. "You finally cut the cord," he said. "Congratulations. Ready to stop patching leaks for them and start steering your own ship?" I laughed. "Depends. You dangling another carrot. Or is this real?" "Director of Product at BrightPath Solutions," he said without pause. "Pay nearly 40% higher than Northbridge ever gave you. Full decision-making power. No sisters, cousins, or family hierarchies. Just customers, data, and people. I want you to write strategy your way." The road hummed beneath my tires. Part of me wanted to shout yes right there. Another part still clung to the memory of promises erased like pencil marks. David seemed to hear my silence. "I've asked before. This time I'm not asking, I'm offering. Send the paperwork," I said finally. "I'm ready." Austin greeted me with heavier air than Jersey ever had, barbecue smoke drifting from food trucks, guitars humming from bars along the strip. BrightPath's office lived in a repurposed red brick warehouse. No golden plaques. Just a whiteboard near the door. "Welcome to the future. Bring coffee." David met me at the entrance, tall, sleeves rolled, sneakers on, eyes sharp but kind. not the plastic grin Charles wore. "Here's your new playground," he said, pushing the door wide. Inside, clusters of standing desks, wires snaking like roots, walls plastered with sticky notes in pink, yellow, and blue. A shelf in the corner sagged under design books and instant noodles. "Pick a spot," David said. "We don't do corner offices. Respect isn't measured by square feet here." I set Playbook N on a desk by the window. For a decade, I'd hidden it under laptops so Aaliyah wouldn't steal from it. Now it sat in the open like a flag staked into new soil. On my first day, David called the team around a whiteboard. No leather chairs. No pastel slides. Just markers and the faint scent of dry erase. He handed me a pen. "Nyla, map how you'd handle onboarding flow." I braced for the usual interruption. Someone leaping in with buzzwords about innovation or AI. But silence held. They waited. I sketched. Sign up, validation, personalized dashboards, failover safety nets. Arrows neat, dense, but clear. When I finished, the room stayed quiet for a beat. Then David smacked the board. This is clarity. This is why she's here." Applause broke. Not the polite, hollow rhythm of Northbridge, but a sound with weight. The first applause I'd heard that didn't echo with pity. At lunch, I sat with two devs over takeout salad. One asked, "So, what finally made you leave Northbridge?" I chewed, swallowed, then said, "Because loyalty without respect is self-betrayal." I realized I was the only patient in a hospital where the doctors never showed up. They burst out laughing. One nodded. "That's the truest thing I've heard all year." That night, when the office emptied, I stayed behind. Playbook and open, laptop glowing. I wrote fresh notes, not to protect a company that treated me like a fire extinguisher, but to build something people would actually use. Every page was a blueprint for a future I finally believed in. David stopped by my desk with coffee. "Any regrets?" I closed the notebook. "Just one. I should have left earlier." He grinned. "Good. Because Morrison Health just called. They're not thrilled with Northbridge's new leadership. Asked if you'd still manage their account here." I froze, half amused, half stung. "Word travels fast." "Not word," David said. "Trust. Clients follow people, not logos. They trust you." That night, I crossed the bridge home. Streetlights glowing across the water. I thought of Charles, of Aaliyah, of the applause that meant nothing. Then I thought of Bright Path, the sticky notes, the real clapping. The old door closing wasn't an ending. It was a lock turning open. The first news reached me through an old Slack ping from a colleague in a dusty group chat called Ops Survivors. "Nyla, you should have seen Aaliyah at the Morrison demo today. Phew, catastrophic." I sat in Bright Path's office, coffee steaming beside me, laptop open, heart stilling. So this was how it began. Morrison Healthcare Group had been one of Northbridge's crown jewels. I'd carried that account on my back for 4 years. Morrison wasn't impressed by shiny slides. They demanded systems that worked when the deadline choked you. That demo was a test, and Aaliyah walked in wearing her powder blue blazer like a costume piece. The title on her deck, "The Future of Healthcare Logistics, Powered by AI." Linda Matthews, Morrison's procurement manager, known for a stare that could cut glass, leaned in and asked flatly, "Walk me through your redundancy plan. What happens if a regional server fails?" Aaliyah flipped to a glossy slide. "With AI, we'll predict failures before they happen. So downtime won't be an issue." Silence. Linda tilted her head, unblinking. "And if the prediction is wrong?" A shuffle of slides. Glossy hospitals, VR headsets, smiling doctors. No plan. Not one documented failover path. A Northbridge engineer in the back shifted, ready to step in. Charles caught his eye and shook his head. He patted Aaliyah's shoulder like a coach in the wrong arena. "Keep going. We sell vision, not details." Linda closed her laptop. "Thank you. We'll be in touch." In procurement speak, that was the obituary. 2 days later, headlines spread like spilled ink. Northbridge runs on family values, literally. The article laid it bare. Charles promoting his sister after 6 months. Internal protests hushed. An anonymous source said, Nyla Carter was the backbone for 10 years. She left just before the restructuring. Maybe she saw it coming. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Yes, I'd seen it. I hadn't expected them to stumble so quickly. Morrison officially pulled their $12 million a year contract. Another outlet mocked, from IPO dream to IPO no. Inside Northbridge, panic reigned. A former coworker texted me at midnight. Board just grilled Charles. He looked like Thanksgiving leftovers. I pictured him, suit rumpled, face flushed, pounding the table, insisting the vision just needed time. But time can't rewind a client's patience. A week later, the announcement came. Charles Benton resigned. Effective immediately. Aaliyah vanished from LinkedIn overnight. Yesterday, she was hashtagging #WomenInTech with pastel selfies in front of her Tesla. Today, this profile is not available. At BrightPath, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from folks I once mentored. Wish we had followed you. You were right, Nyla. I'm updating my resume. Any chance you're hiring? I read each with a swirl of emotions, sympathy, bitterness, and something quieter, relief. Relief that I wasn't on the ship when it scraped the iceberg. One afternoon, David dropped a folded newspaper on my desk. The headline screamed, Northbridge IPO plans derailed after client exodus. He smirked. Looks like you dodged a bullet. I sipped my coffee. Dodged? No. I saw the gun, the finger on the trigger, and I walked out of the room. David threw back his head and laughed. That night, I opened Playbook and slid my pen between crowded pages. I wrote one more line. Loyalty without respect is just a leash. I cut mine. The office light glowed warm over the cover. I sat still, remembering Aaliyah fumbling in front of Linda, Charles thumping his chest, the boardroom applause that had once drowned me out. No, I didn't feel triumph. No glee. Just a truth sharper than any headline. In the end, the truth always leaks through. News about Northbridge kept spilling into the press, but in Austin, it felt like background noise. At BrightPath, the hum was different, messy, colorful, alive. Sticky notes layered across desks, debates sharp but fair, laughter real. David kept his word. He didn't call me invaluable as code for free labor. He slid me an office key, pulled a chair to the same table and said, Make the calls you believe in. For the first time in 10 years, I worked without waiting for permission from a polished smile. Then Morrison, yes, the very client Northbridge lost, sent an email. We heard you're leading operations at BrightPath. We'd like to discuss migration. Not future, not vision, not buzzwords. Migration. A blunt technical word, the kind I trusted. Within 6 months, one contract after another followed. BrightPath, once just a converted warehouse with ramen boxes in the kitchen, was suddenly a name on serious lips. Launch day came in late summer. Austin's convention center glowed with LEDs strung across its high ceilings. Backstage, I rested a hand on Playbook N. The leather was worn, the pages bent, still smelling faintly of coffee. I didn't need it for memory anymore, but I needed it as witness. David appeared, sleeves rolled as always. Nyla, it's your show. Not a dangling carrot, not a performance review. A fact. When the lights hit me, the room hushed. Hundreds of faces watched, not for Aaliyah's buzzwords, not for Benton family loyalty, but for proof. 10 years in this business taught me one thing. I began. Systems don't fail for lack of vision. They fail because no one writes down the boring details. Tonight, I'll show you a product built on scars, not slogans. Laughter broke the tension. I demoed step by step. A 4-second failover made the audience gasp. Dashboards predicting outages an hour early drew nods. And when I closed with, resilience isn't glamorous, but it keeps you alive, the applause thundered. Not hollow, not rehearsed. Real. I bowed, hands still resting on the notebook. For the first time in a decade, applause touched bone. That night, I skipped the after party. I cooked pasta with Zora in our little kitchen. She clinked her glass of sparkling juice against mine. Mama, you finally look light, like you're not carrying a whole company on your back anymore. I laughed, clinking back. To us. To survival. And to living. For once, the smile stretching across my face wasn't painted on. A year later, the Dallas Tech Conference pulsed with white lights and buzzing crowds. My badge read, Nyla Carter, Product Director, Bright Path Solutions. I hadn't expected to see her, but fate's sense of irony was strong. Behind the vendor booths, I spotted Aaliyah. No pastel blazer, no luxury car outside, just a folding stall, stacks of beginner textbooks clutched to her chest. Her makeup couldn't cover the fatigue. She noticed me. Her voice, once loud enough to drown whole boardrooms, was barely above a murmur. Nyla, I owe you an apology. I thought leadership was hashtags and slides. I never cared about redundancy plans or failover paths. Morrison taught me. I had to start over. She hugged the books closer. I nodded once. Good. Keep learning. Nothing more. Sometimes silence is sharper than fury. That afternoon, I stepped on stage for Bright Path's keynote. Applause rose as my name was called. I spoke of resilience, of details that no one wants to write, of systems that live because someone cared enough to record the scars. From the back row, I saw Leah scribbling notes. No spotlight. No LinkedIn hashtags. Just another learner among many. That night in my hotel room, I opened Playbook and the pages were thick with ink and years of labor. I added one line. Silent revenge isn't watching them collapse. Silent revenge is building what they can never touch. I set the book beside a glass of wine. The lamp washed to gold, sealing the chapter. If you ask whether I felt satisfaction seeing Charles vanish or Aaliyah stumble, the answer is no. What I felt was relief. Relief that I had left before the spiral pulled me under. Silent revenge isn't measured by wreckage. It's a quiet evening with your child. It's applause that doesn't need permission. It's a notebook that's no longer hidden, but displayed proudly on a desk. And now I'll ask you, the one reading this, do you believe that sometimes walking away is the strongest revenge of all? Share your story in the comments. Tell me where you're reading from. And if this When I look back, I don't see defeat. Subscribe. I see transformation. Nothing. But for me, it's
walking
like
away
didn't
mean I lost.
Coffee that keeps the fire alive.
I finally
more
chose
stories
myself.
from America's workplaces.
Silent revenge wasn't about watching them collapse.
Thunders louder
it was
than
about
applause.
creating a life where my worth wasn't questioned, where respect wasn't rationed, and where my daughter could see strength in action. This isn't just my story. It's a mirror for anyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or treated like their loyalty was a leash. If you've ever carried the weight while someone else claimed the glory, know this. You are not trapped. You can step out of the cycle. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply living free, respected, and whole. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below and share your own journey. Have you ever walked away from a place or a person who didn't see your worth? I want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's free, but it fuels me to keep bringing you powerful stories of resilience, betrayal, and rebirth, tales that prove silence can roar louder than applause. Stay tuned.
More stories are on the way, because in every workplace, in every family, and in every struggle, there's always someone who finally decides, I will no longer fall in line.